Hey there, Dr. Joel Rosen, the Adrenal Recovery Ninja. I really want to talk to you about stress, the stress recovery ninja. Adrenals are involved, no doubt, but today we're going to be talking to you about how blood sugar is controlled by other things that you don't realize. And you're focusing on your diet, and you are counting your calories potentially, or counting your carbs, or you're going keto, or you're going paleo, or you're doing something different. How about that? You're doing something different and you're not getting the results that you want. And if you're more advanced, you understand that the glucose has a lot to do with it. And if you don't control your glucose, you are not going to fix your stress response that's not working appropriately. And if you don't fix your stress response that's not working appropriately, you're not going to stabilize your glucose, no matter what kind of diet you eat. Hope that made a lot of sense. So anyways, we're going to talk to you about that tonight, and we're going to go through a little bit of a presentation. So I labeled this first one, Achieving Metabolic Flexibility Through Blood Sugar Stabilization. What does that mean? So we just talked about blood sugar stability. If you have an exhaustion problem, a stress problem, a overwhelmed problem, not dealing with stress problem, so you're not only stressed, you don't deal with stress very well. And then on top of that, you get anxious, you get shaky, you get lightheaded, you get jittery, you get crashy, you don't focus, and then you don't fall asleep right away, you can't turn your mind off, or you can turn your mind off, but you wake up all through the night and you just don't feel rested and regenerated. We're talking about flexibility. That's metabolic flexibility. If you want to not have that, you're metabolically inflexible or not flexible or just don't have a lot of flexibility. So that's what we mean when we say metabolic flexibility. But as far as blood sugar stability, it's probably the number one thing that you need to have working properly if you're going to have any chance of metabolic flexibility. So that's the first point that I wanted to talk to you guys about. So the one thing that we got to talk about is, how do you know if your blood sugar is stable? How do you know? I go to the blood test, I go to the lab and they do blood and it's always within the range. Or yeah, that's probably your answer. And so what I would tell you is, as we learn, there's really a bad way of assessing for your blood work through the traditional routes of the labs that we have to go to, because it's so archaic, it's so outdated. It doesn't consider all the things that impact blood sugar. Even when blood sugar is stable, it doesn't mean all the things that are impacting it are stable. And again, I hope that made a lot of sense because it's true. So anyways, how do we know for sure? We need to start taking your finger prick. Bottom line. Again, I've said many times, when you're in the war of stress and you're making every effort to fix the stress-related problem, then you have to not only control your glucose, you have to be aware of exactly why you're doing this as well. So forgot what I was saying in that particular moment. So as we go back though, and we talk about blood sugar stability, the best way that you're going to do it is by taking your finger prick. And that's uncomfortable for people because it's a bit of a pain in the butt. Or you know what I'm finding is a lot of people are actually taking their glucose. So kudos for you for doing that. But you're not really sure of, okay, what does this mean? And so that's the big trick. And really you want to have that glucose in general somewhere between 72 to 90 on a fasting level. But the trick is also you want to keep that stable throughout the day as much as you possibly can. And that means a lot of snacking or not a lot of snacking. In the day when you had bad adrenal health, they would tell you to have a lot of snacks more frequently. And I know this because I suffered myself, had a lot of exhaustion, had really erratic eating patterns. So tell me if this describes you, where you would maybe not have a breakfast, maybe you would realize by the middle of the morning you're hungry, you get frustrated, you get irritable, You become a bear with the sore tooth. You're not fun to be around. It's like a Snickers commercial with Joe Pesci playing you as the grumpy person. And then you have a Snickers. Only you don't have a Snickers. You have a good, healthy snack. It's a brilliant commercial, but not with a Snickers bar, with a good, healthy meal. And so if you're already lightheaded and can't focus and shaky and not dealing with stressors very well, you're not stabilizing your glucose because it's obvious. I mean, it's really obvious. There's a lot of reasons why sugar won't be balanced. That's an obvious one. But the bottom line is you need to take your glucose levels. But you also need to know how to mark and measure them and in relationship to what's good, what's bad. And that's what we're talking about, because we're really talking about if you are eating the way that you are thinking, you're making those changes and you're making improvements, and you're just not sure what's going on with that glucose. You know it's important that you have to measure it. And you know now, I just said you have to be somewhere in between 72 to 90. That's a bold statement for me to say, because there's so many variables that go into that. And that's what we're talking about. So say your immune system. If you have a disrupted immune system, you're going to have chemical messengers that cause insulin levels or growth factors to spike, and that causes an inflammatory mechanism, and that causes your glucose levels to rise. And if you're having small meals more frequently and your glucose levels are already rising, what happens to an already rising level of blood glucose? It becomes higher, and it never really comes down. But then finally it comes down to a certain point, even though it's constantly high, and you call that hypoglycemic. Think about that. It's really true. And you got to realize, okay, it's hypoglycemic to me because I'm used to being higher, which is already high, but now it's fallen and it's low, and I'm hypoglycemic. But it's still hyperglycemic in the blood. Or if you say, nope, that's not true, Dr. Rosen, then do your glucose levels and prove it to me. Prove it to you. That's what we're talking about. So my paradigm shift is, I want you to realize that sickness care and wellness care. Sickness care is seeing what happens when you're already sick and doing something about it. Wellness care is doing something before you're sick and micromanaging at a better level. And glucose is a big part of that. Why do I have that? I don't know if that reminds you of anything, but for me, that reminds me of when I was a kid, and it was a technology where I would record, would love to listen to R&B and hip hop, and it was the early stuff. And I remember making mixtapes and thinking I was so cool, but that was a long time ago. And that's how I feel about the blood glucose establishment, if you will, in terms of how they assess your blood glucose levels, and how you have no clue that even after a 9-12 hour fasting state, that you are still, you're gonna not be in the normal range. That's not telling you what's going on the day-to-day, or how your immune system is impacting your glucose levels, and how the other things we're going to talk about. So really, hopefully you upgrade your cassette tape, and you realize it makes, I heard a joke one time saying, yeah, we have, like, that guy's so old, we have to tell him to get rid of his 8-track tape, and that now we have like satellites in the air that play music. So anyways, so the first, let's talk about hypoglycemic tendencies. So these are the ones where you crave sweets, you get irritable if you miss a meal, you depend on coffee to keep you going and started, you get lightheaded if meals are missed, you relieve your fatigue when you eat, you feel shaky, lightheaded, and jittery, easily upset, poor memory, blurred vision. I talked about that. That was what I had a long time ago, and even today sometimes have those, right? Because people always ask, can you fix yourself from adrenal fatigue? And I would say that if you're not doing a good job and being vigilant every day for balancing your glucose, yeah, you could never recover from adrenal fatigue. However, I would also say that when you do a good job and you understand all the things that impact your glucose levels and control all the stressors at a deeper level, then you can recover from adrenal fatigue. And that's a big aha moment for you guys. And I call it the crossover. It was like with the Matrix when Neo, had a choice between the blue pill and the red pill. And I think it was probably the